You're on the clock.
All right, put your lids down. So if we get this tape by your wallpaper. And we've only got 4 to do today. So ask questions, take notes. And we'll start with Grant. Whatever you want.
All right, great. Good morning. Those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Grant, and this morning I'm going to be talking to you about Henry V and the Battle of Agincourt. Next slide, please. To give you a little context, the Battle of Agincourt took place during the 100-Year War in the year 1415. King Henry V of England was invading France to reclaim lands that were in contest between him and the King of France. So in late summer, he crossed the English Channel and landed at Harfleur, where he put the city under siege. During that time, he lost a lot of his men, but refused to go back to England because he felt like that would be sort of sending a bad signal and giving up. So his next course of action was to try to make it towards the English safe haven at Calais and then cross back over. But to do that, he would have to pass through French-controlled territory the whole time. And he started to receive reports that he was actually being tracked and chased by a large French army several times his size. So, trying to make it to safety, they ended up marching over 200 miles in less than 2 weeks. But they received word on October 24th that the French army had in fact passed them and was ahead of them in their path, and that they were going to have to fight them to make it to safety. So, next slide, please. So, brace yourselves. I'm about to get you into Shakespeare. So,
That's a good one.
that's the context.
That's a good one.
Here.
Where is the king? The king himself is rode to view their battle. Fighting men. They have all 3,000.
Right.
That's 5 to 1.
Recognize the face here in a second.
Besides, they are all fresh. These are fearful arms. Oh, the prince now had here. But 10,000 of those men in England that do no work today. What's he that wishes so? My cousin
Nice.
Westmoreland? Now, my fair cousin,
What's his
we are marked to die. We are enough to do our country loss.
Lockhart.
And if to live, the fewer men, a greater share of honor. God will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. Brother, proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand at tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall see this day and live old age will yearly, on the vigil, feast his neighbours and say, tomorrow is St. Crispin. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars, and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in their mouths as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold down manhood's chief, while then he speaks, the
this is a really important battle in English history. Shakespeare obviously wrote a play for it later on, and I go to the next slide, please. Out of that scene, there are about 5,000 Englishmen about to face roughly 25,000 Frenchmen. To me, that's pretty much the best version of 15th century puffed-up speech. It doesn't get much better than that for that period. But this is probably the paragraph of all of that that most people are familiar with, if you're familiar with it. There's a few, you've seen the series Band of Brothers, pretty sure, no, there you go. But if you go to the next part. There's a few themes and truths about war that Shakespeare brings up during this. This is a huge piece of propaganda. So obviously, you're going to be talking about honor and glory in battle. The fewer the men, the greater share of honor. While they're outnumbered pretty much 5 to 1, Shakespeare is trying to use, or in the clip at least, Henry V is trying to use the promise of if we're victorious today, we have fewer men. When you go home, there'll be more honor, it'll be all the more glorious. Also, it brings in envy. Gentlemen in England now in bed shall think themselves accursed that they will not hear, hold their men hence cheap. That's because the men in England that aren't there are going to be envious of the fact that they weren't there to share in that honor, to share in that glory, and that the men there should be proud of that fact. A legacy, talking about a good man shall teach this story to his son. That for the rest of the time, this will be a story about English victory, about English power and triumph, and that this is going to carry on throughout history, and it's something they should be proud of. The brotherhood and the transcendence of class that he talks about there, being there so vile this day shall gentleman his condition. That's talking about from the lowest of men to the highest, from the peasants with the longbows to Henry himself. This day they're brought to a brotherhood. This day they are made equals by the fact that they've shared battle together and shared warfare and victory. So, to me, it's interesting that Shakespeare would take this instance and put it in a play a few hundred years later. But the fact that it's still a very proud moment in English heritage. Anytime that they're victorious in battle, especially over the French, is going to be something that they want to hold on to. And throughout history, this is probably one of the most important and one of the most widely known and proudest moments in English history, warfare-wise. Next page, please. So the battle itself, those are the estimates of the men. And like I said, it was a combination of peasants and nobility. But basically, it was a slaughter. French knights charged the English lines, and archers flanking the sides were able to just cut them down on the muddy ground. And the English ended up being victorious despite the numbers. I believe the estimates according to the chroniclers is that the English lost 400 men, while the French lost upwards of 6,000 on that day. So while that in itself could be considered propaganda because historical accuracy, the numbers as far as how many French there were have ranged from 10,000 to 200,000. So that's pretty, that almost calls back to Greek epics, where they, enlarge the size of the numbers of the enemy to make the battle all the more glorious. So that's my speech. Does anybody have any questions?